the explanations for why silver is still so undervalued relative to other commodities.
Yeah, that was a fun article for me to research and write. And basically what I did was I showed the peak in all asset prices in 1980. And the reason I showed the peak is because we had high inflation then, right? And everything was running up, not just gold and silver. So I wanted to look at where all asset prices have gone since their 1980 peak, because after 41 years, just on basic inflation, everything should be higher than it was then, even though that was a peak. And everything is, except silver. And sugar is also about at the same level as it was back in 1980. Gasoline is, or excuse me, oil, sorry, crude oil is also below its 1980 peak as of the date I did that chart last week. Everything else is higher. Only silver and sugar are below their 1980 peak. So the obvious question is, why is that going on? Now, the first obvious thing that many people will point to is manipulation. And of course, there is manipulation of gold and silver prices. However, gold is above its 1980 peak substantially. Only silver is not. So I don't think manipulation explains all of it. And the thing to keep in mind about manipulation, a lot of people are bringing that up in response to the article. And my response to that is, look, manipulations don't last forever. They always fail. You can go way back in history. The London gold pool back in the 1960s, they tried to fix and manage the price in. It did not work. So these things always fail. I think it'll fail again. There could be a number of reasons, but if you're manipulating for immoral reasons, you can't win in the end. You will lose. And so I do think that we will see higher gold and silver prices regardless of any manipulation. But we've been here before. I've pointed this out in other articles too, that, you know, back in the mid 1970s, they had raging inflation then, even higher than we do now. And yet gold and silver fell over a 2-year period of time in the mid 1970s. I think most, you know, of your audience knows that. They fell over 40% over 2 years. And in silver's case, when it did eventually begin, you know, when it bottomed, it stayed there for another 2 years before it started to move. But of course, we all know how that story ended. And I think it's similar today. Gold rose 7 times its price from its 1976 low. Silver rose 11 or 12x from its 1976 low. I think the catalysts are building steam today, much like they did back then. So, I mean, I'm preparing for, you know, the next rise up in my gold and silver portfolio, because I think that's what's going to happen. Everything else is becoming overvalued now, and gold and silver are the only things, especially silver, that are undervalued. So I want to, you know, why would I invest in something that's already run up a lot in price and is arguably in bubble territory? I'd rather invest in something that's undervalued, that has potential. And I think that changes when the mainstream comes back into this market. And I think they'll come back into it in a big way, because it'll be fear driving them, at least initially, into gold and silver. What we do know is there is manipulation. We also, in gold and silver, but we also know there's manipulation in all assets. They're all manipulated. The degree to which really depends on how much the government is involved. Well, it was the Hunt brothers that drove silver up. That's actually not the case to a large extent. Yes, they did impact the price, but other entities besides, you know, us at Gold Silver have researched this and found that, you know, the Hunt brothers, what they did only added about $1 or so to the price of silver at the time. Think about it. Back in the 1980s, what did you have? You had literally every single asset was rising in price. Everything, not just silver, you know, that they were buying, but also gold, all commodities, lots of assets were rising in price back in the time. Gold and silver were responding to events. And keep in mind, by the way, why did the Hunt brothers buy so much silver? Because they were worried about the monetary system back then and the dollar. We have similar reasons to do that today, right? But here's another interesting tidbit. back in I think it was 1976, and I forgive me if I don't have the exact date, but it was probably about 4 years before the big spike to $50 in silver. One of the Hunt brothers visited the pits at the COMEX back then. And back then it was open cry, right? It wasn't digital or computerized, and that was actually an open cry pit like you see in some movies like Trading Places, okay? It was like that. He walked into that commodity pit where they were trading silver and everything else, and the whole market stopped and looked back at him thinking, who is this guy that's buying all this silver? So in the mid-70s, they had already been buying a lot. He shows up at the COMEX in the open pit, and they all stop literally trading and turn around and look at this guy. Who is this crazy guy that is buying all this silver?
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information, and it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
I have bad news for you. If you're not rich by now, you're screwed. And if you're in debt, you're even double screwed. How so, you might wonder? Well, the sad truth is that you're working your whole life to make someone else rich. The mega corporations, the banks, the politicians, everyone is getting richer. They get your money. And what is even worse, they get your time, they get your life. You are not even in a rat race. You're in a financial prison. But what could a solution for you look like? Honestly, I don't know, but I know what a solution for me would look like. It's very simple. I use whatever money I have and I multiply it with 1,000. This could make my life much easier and probably yours as well. If you have $1,000 available and multiply this with 1,000, I believe that this could solve some financial issue for the one or the other. Of course, if you're ugly, you would have to multiply it with much more than 1,000. My name is Marco Stan, and this is what I decided to do. I decided to 1000x my money. This is not a joke. I know what you may be thinking. What is this guy talking about? How should this work? This is not possible. Well, I made a detailed video where I laid out my plan. And some clever folks might even want to look at this plan and copy it and do exactly what I do. This is just a little hint on the side. You have two options. You leave, you forget what you have seen. You do whatever you're doing and you hope that somehow you get some other results. Good luck with that. Or you click the link below the video. You enter your email address because I'm not showing this to everybody. You at least watch my video on how I plan to 1000x my money. The choice is yours. Make the right choice. Join me. See what a different future you could have. See at least how I plan to do the 1000x. So click on the link below, enter your email address, and I see you on the other side. Your Marco Stan.